أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Amen. With God's name, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer. The praise belongs to God, the Lord of all systems of knowledge, the merciful benefactor, the merciful redeemer, the sole judge on the day of judgment. We worship you only and we turn to you begging assistance. Guide us on the straight way, the way of those on whom you bestowed your blessings, not those who go astray, nor those who incur your wrath. Amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Ameen, Ameen. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa
Welcome to Study al-Islam. My name is Fitrah Muhammad. I bear witness that there is none worth worship besides Allah. I bear witness and believe in all of Allah's prophets. And I bear witness that Muhammad, prayers and peace be upon him, is his last messenger and a mercy to all mankind. I'm so happy to be here again with you this week. I don't take for granted when I say, that it is indeed so heartfelt to see each and every one of you, to give the greetings to you, to receive the greetings from you, and to share this time with you. Each of us, we don't know what the next day will bring. And so it's really heartfelt to see you again and to share this time with you. And I just want to, and I feel it from each and every one of you when you give the greetings to each other, and how we are really closing the gap on knowing each other. I mean, we know each other across all boundaries, all state and city boundaries, and it's a good feeling. So don't take it for granted. It really is heartfelt. So with that, we've been highlighting community life and development in our community, and I'm so honored to have Mark give us an update on what is happening in Detroit. Mark, assalamu alaikum. Please
Wa-alaikum
share with
salam.
us what's going on in Detroit.
Yes, absolutely. Alhamdulillah. So, assalamu alaikum, everyone. Again, it's an honor to be here with you all today. Let me just start. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Rabbil alamin. Salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Let me say that time is going too fast because when Sister Fisher reached out about this, I did not realize it had been almost a year since we did this last program. So subhanAllah, there's a lot going on, and I think I need to try to slow down a little bit and appreciate each of these months a little bit more. So I want to try to stick with this month's theme of building and preserving Muslim African American community life, history, and culture. And so I'll try to reflect on the way our project seeks to do some of those things, but also just sort of bring everyone up to speed with where we've been headed with the project since last September, inshallah. So I'm going to share my screen and start to jump right into it. Bismillah. Okay, and so again, thank you for the opportunity to come back here. And I see the participants growing, mashallah, almost 100 folks. But to Sister Fitra's earlier point, when I've joined this call, it certainly does seem very familiar, very family-like. It seems like all of you know each other quite well, and it's a very warm space, and I appreciate the chance to be here with y'all. So, just I'm going to shoot through these first two slides more or less as a reminder of kind of what I covered last time, and then try to bring you more up to speed. And so, what we've been doing is trying to combine community organizing with housing and land development to both build a healthy community and empower our neighborhood on the west side of Detroit. Sometimes we say revitalize our neighborhood. But we work in an area that is just a mile west of historic Masjid Wali Muhammad, and very close to the Muslim Center in Detroit. And we've been working in this neighborhood for about 10 years now. And you know, a lot of what we do is premised off of this idea about community life that Sister Fitrah was talking about. And she went back to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but we often reference this quote from Imam Warthi Muhammad, where he says that the true life that God wants for all people, not one people, their true life is a life of cooperation, community life. And so especially in our earlier documents, you would have seen this quote shared a lot, and just trying to remind people that this is the core of what this is about, is building community. That said, this project has always been both about the aspect of building community and building neighborhoods, building places, revitalizing spaces for people. And so I'll kind of talk on both of those today. Bismillah. So in terms of community, you know, over the years, we've done a number of activities to simply cultivate a sense of community. And we try to do this in a way that's intergenerational. You know, a lot of us at the core of the work, a lot of us who first moved our families around the masjid as a part of this project, we're of a certain age range, certain, you know, sort of stage in life. But the programming has always been geared at engaging folks across the age spectrum, and I think we see that when you look at the attendance at our events, at our retreats, et cetera. Not everyone is at a stage of life where they can relocate to a neighborhood because you decided to kick off a project, but that doesn't mean that folks don't find other ways to be supportive, but also to just tap into the community building itself. So some of the photos you see here, us at a rally when we were helping a woman get a home after she had been driven into property tax foreclosure here in Detroit. One of our movie nights, which we kind of have a habit of doing to really open up conversation around various topics that might be impacting our community. Our block club. This upper left is folks from our prosperous Detroit entrepreneurship training workshop. We've graduated about 130 aspiring entrepreneurs from our workshop. In the upper right, there is actually one of our local Islamic scholars who also has a long background in the arts. And he caught the vibe at our street fair and decided to break dance a little bit for us. That's the dynamism of Detroit. You break dance one day and teach the theater the next morning, alhamdulillah. And then we got down here in the bottom, some photos from Day of Dignity, of which we were a host site for a few years. One of our outdoor movie nights here on the upper left. I think a group of volunteers here on the right when we were doing this is actually from when we had some folks from the Ford Foundation in town with us. And then on the left, on the bottom, one of our book clubs. So just a number of activities ranging from, you know, again, movie nights to concerts to book clubs to some more particular types of events that I'll get to later in the program, but really just filling space where we need it to help bring people together in healthy spaces to build community. And sometimes that meant partnering with other organizations. Sometimes that meant filling the gaps where you thought other organizations might be providing certain types of programming, but it was missing. And so we stepped in to do that. This last photo here is from our street fair last summer, where we brought out Freeway for all my East Coast Philadelphia people, but also had some really important local talent, brothers like the poet Tariq Crain, the sisters from Ain't Afraid, and a number of other really talented artists. So our structure actually doesn't look too different than it did look last year. I was peeking back at the org chart that I showed you all last year. So we've been pretty consistent on staff since then, though we've had a few rearrangements. Some of the folks in this org chart, just the color coding, the folks in orange are full-time, the folks in green are part-time, blue are like fellows, like our administrative assistant we fund through a Vista fellowship through AmeriCorps. And then the folks in red are like volunteer staff, basically people who give so much time that they made it onto the org chart, even though they aren't officially on payroll with Dream. So the reason I share this is because for our first 8 years, we were all volunteer led. You know, again, we were a group of folks just starting this project, trying to build community together, really figuring out what this looked like. And then over time, we really started to pivot into more of a professionalized community development organization, really sort of trying to move with some expertise in this space around community development and how it's done in places all over the country, right? As Sister Fitrah mentioned, this idea of community life itself is not new, but also the type that we do is not necessarily new, even though it isn't as visible in our Muslim community as perhaps it should be or could be. So some of the folks who supported us over the years, number one, I'll say that, again, we started as a group of volunteers, and in those early years especially, all of our support came from within our community. And I mean both our Black Muslim community and then our broader Muslim community in the Metro Detroit area in particular. And then it grew out from there. Alhamdulillah, we still maintain, I think, a pretty significant amount of community funding, but also as we started to professionalize and staff up, we started to get support from a number of foundations. So this is kind of like a glimpse at some of the folks who've worked with us, but the Kresge Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation, Henry Luce has been a big partner, and I'll mention them later. Enterprise Community Partners is probably one of our most important ones. And that is because Enterprise is, a leading organization nationally for community development. They fund groups all over the country. In particular, they have a really strong faith-based development initiative that I think the Muslim community should be tapping into more. We are not a part of that particular initiative, though we hope to become one day. But we started with them in a special cohort that they started in Detroit for what they called elevating community development organizations. So those of us who are kind of on a startup phase, but on a growth trajectory. And so they've been a really, really important partner to us over the last couple of years. So just wanted to name some of these folks who have stepped up to support the work over the years. So the key highlights, and again, this isn't too different than what I shared with you all last year, and I'll explain why. We've had our heads really kind of in the books this year, learning and developing and building our model. But we are finishing our 16th unit right now, so we've only done one renovation in the last year. But big part of that is because we're focused on new construction, which I'll talk about. But we've got another family moving in 2 weeks. The trees we planted throughout the neighborhood, which continue to be really important for the aesthetic in the neighborhood, and that's something I'm really glad we did almost 8 years ago now. About 60 parcels owned by Dream or our community members at this point. When I say our community members, I mean our board members who live in the neighborhood and own their own home and the lot adjacent to it, or our volunteers, et cetera, but folks who are really close into our work and are in the neighborhood because of Dream. So some we own directly, and then some owned by those folks. 130 folks graduated from the entrepreneurship training program. Over 7,000 folks at the street fairs over the years. 30 folks are top volunteer leaders trained in community organizing and leadership development workshops, and then over 650 volunteers engaged over the years. So the volunteer engagement piece has been really key for us, and that's been volunteers have tapped in at every level. I mean, I'm talking about 200 people to come out to plant trees, but also volunteers who've written $250,000 grants for us and managed, major projects for us, right, in their spare time effectively. Surfacing those really committed and talented volunteers, providing on-ramps for them into the work, investing in them so that they can travel, so that they can take professional development courses, so that they can network in this space and continue to learn. Those are the types of things we try to do with our volunteers. So I want to give you a brief update on the Dream Storytelling Project, which I introduced to this group last year, for those of you who were here. So the Dream Storytelling Project, sometimes called the Detroit Black Muslim Storytelling Project or Detroit Muslim Storytelling Project. This is a funny project because it started off as such a small thing, and it's sort of it's I didn't know it'd still be going close to 2025, but this started as like the nugget of the idea in 2020 was, let's buy some iPhones and record oral history interviews of some of the elders and leaders in our community, and then string them together into a short documentary, basically. And what it turned into was actually working with a PhD in anthropology to design the program, recruiting a bunch of young folks from the community to actually learn how to do the videography. Several of them trained by Sister Pamela's daughter, Sister Malika, who's one of our neighbors now. But they were trained in the videography, they were trained in how to do ethnographic interviews. And then these young folks interviewed the elders in our community and captured these incredible histories sometimes the interviews that were up to 3 hours long. And sometimes it was a kid in the community interviewing, their grandfather or their grandmother or a great aunt or somebody who was like a great aunt to them, having grown up in the community together. And so it was these really powerful and really personal interactions. And so far, we've captured about 65 of these and have them in this permanent archive at Western Michigan University, where they'll be available in perpetuity, inshallah, for folks to learn from our stories. And one of the ways that I've seen this used locally is we have a group that a family, a large, mashallah, family believers, and they put on a dinner each year that they call the Nisar Awards. And at this dinner, they honor folks in the community. And for the last couple of years, the highlight reels that they've put together for the folks, they've been pulling, a lot of the content for those highlight reels from this oral history archive. And so when we saw that, we said, yes, this is exactly what we wanted. We wanted these stories captured. We wanted people in the community to be able to use these things, put them into action, and also to study from them and be inspired by them. So the storytelling project started as, again, this thing with a couple of iPhones, and we thought maybe we'd do 20 interviews. And then we built it out and sort of brought in more expertise, and we added in this youth component, and we ended up getting some more funding to actually do upwards of 100 interviews total. So we still have about 30 more to do. We've identified the subject, and we're on a timeline to begin those interviews eventually. But then we were able to add on this second part, which was actually to be able to create a real feature-length documentary about our work. So not necessarily just those iPhone videos strung together, but we started to bring out a real film crew, really started to capture really good footage for a real documentary. And so that's what we've been working on. And that'll take some time to actually come to fruition. As you can imagine, it takes, several years for that sort of thing to come together. Somehow I have to also carve out time to watch all the footage that we've recorded, but we got a whole team working on it and trying to figure out the best angles. One of the folks who will be featured in the documentary is a brother who's on our staff. His name is Dawood Clark. And Brother Dawood is our property manager, actually. And so he maintains not just our houses in the neighborhood, but the overall sort of aesthetic of the neighborhood. And Brother Dawood served 32 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. And he would say that he was rightfully convicted but wrongfully sentenced. He committed a crime that he acknowledges, but he was given 2 life sentences. And thankfully, he was able to come home after 32 years. And so we met Brother Dawood in 2019. He became the first resident in our transitional home for formerly incarcerated men, eventually became the house manager, and ultimately became the property manager for us right now. So I want to share this 3-minute clip from Brother Dawood, and I'll explain why afterwards.
It's 24 days, 23 days in the wake up right now. And that's a term that prisoners use that, that's when you get parole, that's when you get off the sanctions or something like that. When I say it's 23 days in the wake up, I had to do 4 years parole when I got out of prison. And 23 days in the wake up is the day I'm finally free. That's 35 straight years that I've been.
Well, it's still up on her name, but yeah. How many locked?
Under the control of the state of Michigan, Michigan Department of Corrections. So, December 28th, I'm going to Canada. I'm leaving the state. I don't know how long we're going to go.
Inshallah.
Inshallah, but I'm putting some wings on my back and I'm going to fly.
You already flying.
Everybody to make a butt.
This ain't that kind of party.
I was born by the river in a little tent. And just like that river, I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. It's been a long time coming, but I know the change has come. Love you.
Yes.
Woo, you did it.
And we were looking for somebody who could live in the house while we were finishing it, and eventually kind of take leadership of the house. And a mutual friend introduced us and said, I think this is the brother for you. And then I started to learn his story a little bit more, and not even the long story, but the immediate story, the fact that he was biking over here from Highland Park every single day, multiple times a day, to make salat and to connect with the Muslims and to just be grounded.
Wow, it's all signed off by your parole officer. So it's like you're good to go. Wherever you want to go.
Where you want to go?
Not sure.
Mark, we need 2 weeks.
Sorry. We love you, Dawood. And one thing, like I say again, that I'm so grateful for is your leadership, your care, your integrity, and your solidarity to your community. And I'm just grateful to be in your circle. That's how I feel, sincerely.
Alhamdulillah. So, you know, the reason I wanted to share that video in particular is because Brother Dawood has been such an incredible part of this project over the last couple of years. But part of the reason, and I'm going to go back to my screen sharing in just a second, part of the reason is because when I've, you know, you all may have seen my bio in the email that went out. I accepted Islam at 20 years old in college. I was on the tail end of college at Northwestern University, and finally the message got to me. And I took Shahada that February. Alhamdulillah. Pretty soon after that, I started working at a place in Chicago called the Inner City Muslim Action Network, EMAN, which I think a lot of folks are familiar with. So, you know, my story is, you know, I don't have this story of you know, that sort of like stereotypical story of the Muslim who came to Islam in prison. But I do think that that's an important story. And when I was a young Muslim, I went to a program for this organization called the Taiba Foundation. They do distance learning for Muslim inmates. We eventually partnered with them on our transitional home. But this was almost 15 years ago. And there was a brother who was speaking about his experience of coming home. And we were in a predominantly South Asian masjid on the north side of Chicago. And this was an African-American brother who had spent some time locked up, and he was telling his story. And part of the story he told is coming home and going to a predominantly African-American masjid in the south suburbs of Chicago and feeling completely shunted, feeling like completely unwelcome, feeling unwanted. And he eventually had to find place for community somewhere else. But to hear him tell that story and the pain that was associated with that story to a non-Black audience really hurt me. That he was having to tell these other folks this experience of the solidarity he couldn't find from his own people. That really hurt me. So when we talk about Project Homecoming, part of what we're doing is an acknowledgement that 20% of the inmate population in the Michigan Department of Corrections are Muslim. And we know that, number one, Muslims are getting locked up at higher rates. But number two, a big part of that is because conversion within the Department of Corrections is still a very real thing. And these brothers are still having transformative life experiences that bring them to Deen. And it's Deen that is sustaining them through the worst type of living environment. And what we try to do with this house is make sure that when brothers come home, we're there to catch them. We're there to provide a bridge to them back into community life. We're there to soften those rough edges of how they might have had to practice in that single-sex rough environment versus what it looks like to practice the Deen healthily outside. And so a lot of it is, you know, really just making sure that we're serving each element of our community and not abandoning folks, really. So, you know, I wanted to just share that in particular and why I included that clip from Brother Dawood and why his type of story is important. This next slide here, and I gotta watch the clock because I know I start talking, Sister Fitrah. This next slide is a few photo recaps from a program we were able to do earlier this year called the Black Religion Summit. This was an incredible program where we brought out this sister in the top center here named Dr. Camila Mootman Oseguera, who is a professor at the Chicago Theological Seminary. She is an incredible mental health professional who's built the Muslim Wellness Foundation and runs the Black Muslim Psychology Conference. And she had done some research with the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding around why Islamophobia actually tends to show up in higher rates among Black Christian congregations than it does in white Christian congregations. When you adjust for political persuasion. Okay, so they're scientists, they're statisticians, right? So they did the correct adjustments and found that in Black congregations, Islamophobia actually is higher than in white congregations. And this completely goes against the narrative that we tell ourselves about how every Black person got a Muslim cousin and Islam is so familiar in the Black community and all this, right? And it's true that like Islam might be familiar, but that familiarity does not remove bias. And so what her research did was really dig into why is this the case. And what we were able to do was bring her to Detroit for really like a weekend long of events. So we did a big public program where we invited out a bunch of local clergy, but just the general public to hear this presentation. And then we were able to follow that up with some really deep panels with Christian clergy and then with Muslim leaders. We had both men and women on both of these panels, really digging into her presentation and reflecting on it and what does it mean for their congregations and their broader community. And then we actually built a whole weekend around this in partnership with the Luce Foundation. And we actually brought in about 40 folks from around the country to also present on the work that they're doing in sort of the Black religion space. But this was a really important event for us because we organize, right? Like we do community development and we do a lot that's specifically in the Muslim community, but we do a lot of work that touches the broader public. And so we have to be able to move amongst Black Christian communities and folks of other persuasions and people who are not like, we just have to for the sake of our work, right? And we have to bring ourselves as Muslims and our practice of Islam to that. But part of that is understanding the dynamics here. And again, I think most people were surprised to find out how prevalent Islamophobia is in the Black Christian community. So we dug into that. I also want to share this that folks can look up, or I can drop a link to when I stop talking. But we were able to have an article come out in the Journal of Islamic Faith and Practice called "Beyond Homes Around a Mosque: Muslim-Led Community Development in a Major City, U.S. City." And so this article, which was actually written by my beloved wife Hazel, this really kind of lays out everything we tried to do with Dream over the years, frankly. I mean, if you were looking for just like a 10-page document that tried to explain our model and some of our ups and downs and what we've experienced, this is a really good starting point. And so I wanted to share this for folks who might want to read more later about what we've tried to do. And also simply promote this journal, which I found to be a really good journal. And then the last update before I pivot into some of the housing work. So this, one of the more recent partnerships that we've been able to establish is with a local outlet called Bridge Detroit. So Bridge Detroit is a nonprofit news outlet that does really good, in-depth journalism in the city, helmed by one of the city's sort of most premier journalists, Stephen Henderson. And they approached us a few months back, and they approached us kind of vaguely, actually, and just we went out, sat down for coffee, and they started to explain this kind of high-level concept about how as much community engagement as they do to make sure that they're doing informed news for folks, they want to do more. And knowing that Detroit is a city of faith, and when I say city of faith, I mean the rich history, obviously, of the Muslim community there and what it means for our particular community, but also in general. I mean, you talk about a city that had 3,000 churches at one point. Like I could walk down Linwood, the same street where historic Masjid Wali Muhammad is, and practically at every corner when I was a kid, you find a church. And even today, it's like every other corner. So this is just like how Detroit is, right? And so they wanted to work through faith institutions to touch people on the ground and make sure that they were hearing what folks wanted to read about. So they approached Triumph Church, which is the single largest church in the city of Detroit, in Metro Detroit, and have multiple campuses. They approached the Detroit Downtown Synagogue, which is the only synagogue actually in the city of Detroit, city limits. And then they approached Dream. And, we're not a masjid, right? But they knew of us because of the work that we've been doing in community, and because we're out there and because we're visible and because we're active. And so, it was an honor that they would approach us. It was a little bit disheartening that they couldn't find a masjid to go to that they felt would be on par with how they were partnering with this church and this synagogue. But we felt a bit honored that they thought of us and approached us, and then we've tried to be a conduit to the local masajid so that so this news can reach our folks and so that our folks can reach these writers. So I want to try to end with this conversation around housing and then be quiet in time for any questions. And I shared this hadith last time from the Prophet ﷺ, that there's no right for the son of Adam except in these things: a house in which he lives, a garment to cover his nakedness, a piece of bread and water. Right. And so for us, this hadith really is a declaration of a set of human rights, of which housing is the first one that the Prophet ﷺ names. And this really undergirds our thought that no matter what your political persuasion is, or any other sort of vector of your identity, housing availability and attainability is something that we should care about as a Muslim community and be able to sort of rally around. And so for us, a big part of that is continuing to work on this community land trust. And I think I introduced this concept last year, and we have just been sort of, just kind of like chipping away at it over the last year. So this article is actually only about 2 weeks old, and it really focuses actually on the Detroit Justice Center, who's a core partner of ours, providing technical assistance and technical assistance and legal support as we stand up our community land trust. They wanted to talk to one of DJC's partners, and so they came out and talked to us and photographed us, and we ended up in the article. But here's how the land trust works, right? So basically, a family or an individual purchases the house that sits on the land that continues to be owned by the land trust. The purchase price is more affordable because the homeowner, they're only buying the house, they're not buying the land. They lease the land from us. They get a 99-year ground lease. It's renewable. It can also be passed to their heirs, etc. But it's a ground lease. It isn't a sale of the land. And then the homeowners agree to resell their home at a restricted price so that it can maintain its affordability in perpetuity, right? So even if home prices skyrocket in our neighborhood, the folks who own these homes are committing to cap their appreciation so that the next family with income limits can also be able to move into that home. So the model is really about community stability, more than it's about using your home as a wealth building tool, which is kind of what we're all always taught to do. And it's a bit elusive for us as Black people. I mean, it works for some folks, especially if you're pushing the limits in terms of where we buy houses. But we kind of know that, like, once the neighborhood becomes predominantly Black, the values become artificially deflated. And that is just the kind of a reality of the housing market. And so part of what we're doing with this model is saying, folks can build wealth through investments or through entrepreneurship or through these other means, but having a home is about shelter, and our priority here is about community stability, not any one individual or family's wealth accumulation at the expense of the neighborhood. So this is where we're working currently, right? So this upper right corner here, just next to this red bar, is where the Muslim Center is, or the Muslim Center is right inside this red bar. Phase 1A is where we're currently working, and these orange squares are where we're trying to do our new developments, and I'll show you a little bit more. 1B is where we'd expand to next. Then we go down to 2, which takes us down to the street called Highland, and then we ultimately go down to Webb. And these 3 phases become the totality of our impact turf as an organization. Whereas previously, 1A was really our only impact turf. And all of our renovations have happened within this 1A so far, that we've done community engagement across this whole sort of geography. And so looking at Linwood Street here, just for reference, Masjid Wali Muhammad is right here. So part of what we've tried, the narrative that we've tried to push to folks over the years has been, we need Muslim density in the city of Detroit. And, while it's good to be able to drive to the east side and know that there's a masjid over here that I can pray at and I'll be comfortable, or I can go over here and I can pray. Alhamdulillah, those are all good, and may Allah bless all those efforts. Just thinking about how we become the most visible, how we have the most impact, how we welcome people into a space that is culturally ours is really dependent on us establishing some sort of density. And so that was really part of the logic when Dream doubled down in this neighborhood because of our proximity to the Muslim Center, to Masjid Wali Muhammad, to Masjid Al Haq a little bit further down here, and then hoping that the Muslims would continue to sort of fill in this space. So here's what we're looking at for our community land trust, our new construction. And we're brand new to new construction, y'all. So there's been a bit of a learning curve here for us, a lot of learnings actually that hopefully we can share with folks over time, but we're working our way through it. So we're looking to start with about 10 units, mainly single family homes and then a few duplexes. Really trying to accommodate families, because we found with our work that, we have some really beautiful families that moved into the neighborhood because of Dream, but once they had one kid too many, these houses, these 100-year-old houses in our neighborhood just weren't big enough for them anymore. So how do we bring some diversity to the housing type in the neighborhood? How do we accommodate bigger families? We all know Muslims like to have big families, and then phase 1B includes more duplexes and quadruplexes. And these quadruplexes would actually be rentals. So we would use some of the rental income to help with our operating expenses, while the income from the home sales would go back into further development. And then we're looking at a number of different layout types, and we actually haven't necessarily gotten to the exterior design of the units yet. But we're kind of working through all these things. So we've got our architects on board. We've got working with a local financial firm doing the pro forma and all the financial modeling and making sure that we can pass underwriting and everything. So that's all happening. Let me see if there's any last things I want to say about the land trust. The last thing I'll say about the land trust is just about this question of affordability versus attainability. So we're starting at providing units between 80 and 120% AMI, that area median income. That is not affordable in the city of Detroit. And whether we can drive down that income range lower is really going to be dependent on how the grants come in over the next couple of months as our full capital stack, as they call it, comes together, the full list of sources of money for the project. How much of it is philanthropic will determine how much subsidy we can offer, basically. But in Detroit, we deal with an issue that the area median income in the city of Detroit is only about $34,000. And it's completely detached from the metro area median income, which includes places like Livonia and Warren and these other cities outside Detroit that drive up the AMI that Detroit gets measured against. And so, we know this, it's a reality. We know that with what we're currently about to offer, we may not be serving the lowest end of that income spectrum, but we have not lost sight of that, and we do hope to be able to make that a priority in the future. But this 80 to 120 range is also really important, because now they're using this term workforce housing. And what they're basically saying is that people with full-time, middle-class jobs these days often need some sort of housing subsidy, as a matter of fact. And so they're calling it workforce housing. And so that's more so in the range of what these first set of new construction looks like for us with the workforce. So I wanted to lastly just remind folks about the Dream Center that we're building. And so we started by working out of a house in the neighborhood. We really started by working out of a set of folders in my personal office in my house. And then we moved into a house in the neighborhood, and our volunteers would meet up there. We do programs there. Eventually our first person on staff was working there. We vacated that house to let a family move in, and then we moved into a space in the Muslim Center, which we've since outgrown in a number of ways. And so this Dream Center, inshallah, will be just about a block south of where the Muslim Center Detroit is. We're still committed to this neighborhood. We're also committed to trying to take our teachings and our learnings and partner with more masajid, kind of spread out in that sort of way, and also doing more programs across the city. But in terms of where we're focusing our development efforts and expenses, it's still in this neighborhood. And part of that starts with building the Dream Center and giving folks this place to come, where we've got an office, where we've got a digital literacy lab, where we've got an outdoor courtyard, where we've got a small performance space where we do our next movie night, inshallah, instead of on an open field, where we got a retail kiosk for folks who graduated from our entrepreneurship training course. And so for us, this feels like the right size and scale for where our work is right now and where the neighborhood is, but it's also something that's built in a modular way and something that we can expand on in the future, inshallah. And so this is just kind of like a nighttime look at the Dream Center from behind it, and then an aerial. And so you see as the concept has developed and we've gone through now preliminary plan review with the city, and we're getting ready for site plan review. We're working with our civil engineers on where to tap into the water lines and electric and all that. It's developed over time. So the first rendering you saw didn't include the solar panels on the top of these units. And this retail kiosk was shorter in the first version that you saw, but we've now decided to extend that to be a full 40-foot. We've done a cut through on this container so that folks chilling in the courtyard can see through to what's going to be a pocket park over here where children can play, or where elders can take walking laps, or whatever it might be. Hopefully something that has something, again, for everyone in the neighborhood. And then we've done this wheelchair lift as well, just to continue to try to make this the most accessible space possible. So that's really, I think, an update on kind of where we've been with Dream over the last few years, or over the last 10 months, I guess, 11 months since we last spoke. Hopefully that covered everything that you wanted to hear, Sister Fitrah, that you were hoping I'd bring. But I want to pause there and kind of open for any questions as well. And I'll look at the chat now and see what's been happening. Oh, Dr. Aldine, mashallah, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. So, wow. I mean, on Study al-Islam, we have seen a few different models of what community life looks like. We've seen New Medina down in Mississippi, which was massive land ownership in the rural area of the town. We are seeing now what is going on in Detroit, right in the center of the city. And then next week we're going to see the Clara will soon be welcoming its first tenants to move in. So this has been really good to show the opportunities and the different models of community life on a number of different levels. So I want to just, first of all, congratulations to the Detroit community and everyone associated with moving this project along. Let me ask you to simplify the opportunities to become a part of this community life. Is there home ownership and then investment? What are the opportunities that the believers that are looking at this right now, who might be developing in their own community, but may be interested in relocating to Detroit? So share with me, what are the opportunities to become involved, to be a part of the community? Is there ownership? Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. So currently what we've done are single family home renovations in our neighborhood, and a couple of duplexes. And some of those are rentals and several of them have sold, and mainly to local folks. So we've had, I think, 2 families relocate from out of state, and we've had more show interest, but we just don't always have units ready when people are ready for that life change. So part of what we're hoping to do is kind of move faster, build bigger, and be able to release a lot of units at once, like you're kind of able to do with the Clara, and be able to kind of, rather than sort of, oh, we got one now, we'll have one 9 months from now, and your life circumstances may have changed, and now we got to look for the next tenants, et cetera. But the community land trust will be primarily about ownership. So again, it's ownership for the community's sake. So there is a cap in appreciation when you decide to resell your home, and you're making sure that the next people can also own it at an affordable or attainable rate. but that is definitely a huge part of it is home ownership. And then, you know, it was silly of us, but all these years we never stood up an investment model, unfortunately. And I see someone put a question about whether this was a nonprofit or an LLC. We're a nonprofit and have been. Just last night, I was talking to my finance and ops director about is there a future where we have a development arm that's bringing additional revenue for Dream and helping with other projects, and that may be the case as we sort of learn this game more. But we started as a nonprofit. We started by raising charitable donations for these houses back when Detroit's housing market was really in the dumps and you could get those houses for super cheap and labor cost a lot less, right? But and this is to Sister Fitrah's point earlier, it costs the same amount of money to build a house in Chicago as it does in Detroit.
Yeah.
But incomes in Detroit are far less. And so like where this is an uphill battle everywhere across. I mean, we know that housing availability is an issue across the country to the tune of about 4 million housing units. So you can still get houses for relatively cheap in Detroit, especially you coastal folks. But the game has changed, and a lot of our neighborhoods have rebounded finally to pre-recession prices, and you see some of our historic homes selling for what they should be selling for now and so forth. So certainly things have shifted, and we do plan to, in due time, roll out an investment model to help us continue chipping away at these renovations and to just open another line of revenue for the organization.
So before I open it up for questions, I don't know if my question was quite answered, but so I'm going to ask it again in a different way. So I understand that the goal is home ownership and for people to live in the community. What about someone who wants to build a home and rent the home out? Is that a possibility? And
absolutely.
when you answer that, can you just give us kind of a cost of what the size of the home would be? I see you showed 4 bedrooms, but I can't remember. Did you have? Is that the models that you're building are 4 bedrooms? I understand for family, as Muslims do have big families. Is that the model you're showing?
So we're gonna, in that particular, in that first phase of that development, we're planning to have some 4 bedrooms, some 3 bedrooms, and then a couple of duplexes with 2 bedrooms. So we're really trying to meet, and I'll tell you, we're always like balancing different interests, right? The city really wants us to focus on multifamily. Like that's really their only interest. We're actually pushing back against them by saying, hey, we need to include some single families in these because that's what our community needs, our target community, and because we really want to be building a mixed income community over time. We're not trying to do concentrated poverty. We're not trying to recreate that game. So we have to have houses that appeal to a range of family types and incomes, et cetera. To your point, so I would say I don't have the full price point on the new development right now.
Okay.
We're looking at probably an $8 million project for those first 20 units. And again, the capital, how that's going to be financed is still coming together. We actually have critical meetings this week with funders, with local community development finance institutions. But on the renovation side, we have plenty of homes still available that can be renovated and could be put on the rental market. And we've had folks do that in the past. Like we've had a few friendly investors renovate a home and then rent it out at an affordable rate to a community member who's been really active. We've had that happen several times now. And but again, the prices are the prices. You're looking at least $175 per square foot. Let's say you're looking at a 1,200 square foot home in our neighborhood, which is pretty average for us in the immediate area. That's a $200,000 renovation. Can we bring that price down for you a little bit with our team? Probably, but being realistic, you should expect $175 a square foot. So it's just, COVID did a number to the labor and supply market and construction, of course.
So when you're ready to roll out, and if you're looking for investors, I don't know, I know, but if you are looking for investors and when you're ready to roll out that opportunity, will you come back on Study Al-Islam and give us the opportunity to become investors? I mean, I know that you don't want 100 people that can only give, $25,000 because that then becomes just too too
A bit of
difficult
an
to
operational
manage.
hassle,
Yeah.
but yeah, yeah.
But there may be some people who can meet the investment price, who have money sitting, who
Absolutely.
love to invest. So I want to encourage you to put an investment package. Well, when you put your investment package together, that you'll
Yeah.
come on Study Al-Islam and give us an
So
opportunity.
I can definitely promise you that I will do that, Sister Fitrah. I appreciate that opportunity. And the last piece I'll add to that conversation right now is that we are actually, and I just ask for your du'as because I don't like to obviously talk about things too early, but we're actually working on a Sharia compliant municipal bond to really fund the next scalable phase of this work. We're having really strong conversations with the right state agencies. I'm actually I think we also have an opportunity through Wayne County and potentially. So there's a lot there, and we may have an investment vehicle for accredited investors sooner than later, actually. So I will certainly keep you up to date.
Yeah, because we have some strong business organizations within our community, and we just don't know what everybody is doing. And so Study Al-Islam has kind of taken the position to be the vehicle to showcase these great works. Like Philadelphia has an amazing business community. DC has one. There's a lot of, I think Newark has one. And maybe even on Study Al-Islam, we may collectively want to put our money together and become investors in the project in Detroit. Let's open up for questions. I see Dr. Amina is on the line, and I certainly welcome her. Dr. Amina, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead and ask your question.
I was up in Detroit at Dr. Camilla's lecture and this wonderful occasion. And what occurred to me was the need to spell out the vision. You have many projects going in the community. You're bringing the community, Muslim and non-community and non-Muslim community along with you. I heard some questions, especially about Islamophobia in the Black Christian community that I had never heard before. I was smiling. Oh, you think we do that? But there's a vision here. You're not just every opportunity that comes along grabbing it. And there's also a need to explain how one gets to grant philanthropic agencies and work on grants. Thank you.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Abdeen. Thank you for that. And it was, of course, an honor to have you here with us that weekend. I think so. The overall vision remains transforming this neighborhood on the west side of Detroit through this Muslim-led effort. Ideally, that means as many of us coming to the neighborhood as possible, but also us driving a positive cultural change and community development for our people, more broadly speaking, Black Detroiters in particular. And so that is kind of, that remains at the core of it. And opportunities come along and you decide this one matches or this one's a little out of scope or whatnot. The documentary project, for instance, is not something that we knew was in the cards for us 6 years ago, but it came along, it continued to grow, and it matched what we were trying to do and produce. So yeah, that's what I can say on that point. And I kind of lost the second part of your question a little bit, Dr. Abdeen, actually.
Yeah. So let's go to the next question, Marsha. Marsha.
Let me say, so
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so I see iPhones unmuted, so we'll go to them just next. But to the question, so grants, we got into it through a very slow relationship building process. Right. When it comes to, so obviously we have a bunch of family foundations in the Muslim community, and you might access those through your local masjids, personal networks, or what have you. And then when we talk about other foundations, it's really about meeting the right program officer, introducing yourself, and almost dating them, if you will. Like you really have to build a long-term relationship that you're cultivating, just like you would any other donor. It's not their money they're giving, but you still have to build that long-term relationship. And what I will say is when we were all volunteers, we didn't have the capacity to hold those relationships. That's part of the reason we relied so much only on community funding. And once we had people who could give this full-time attention, we were able to hold those relationships much better. The next person on the iPhone.
Marsha, what's our next question?
So the person with the iPhone is off of mute. Can you please state your question? I don't know the name.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Sister Pamela again from Historic Masjid Wali Muhammad. I just wanted to say this work is difficult in the city of Detroit. And Brother Mark, you know, he just talked about the relationships with our foundations. They're big, deep-pocketed foundations. But if you don't know these people, if you don't have the relationships, you cannot even get in the room. You cannot even get a meeting. This is really tough work to deal with all the municipalities. And Michigan has a lot of money right now, thanks to the Biden administration and post-COVID money. But we were just named in July. The Metro Detroit area has the most overpriced housing in the country.
Wow.
There's gentrification going on in the city of Detroit. They are building new homes. Developers are building new homes in low-income areas that cost $300,000. I'm not sure who's buying that. So Brother Mark is doing this really important work focused on people who need homes. Detroit is half of Detroiters rent. They can't even afford homes. We don't have enough in the supply. That's part of the reason why housing is overpriced. So for those of you on the line that can assist Brother Mark with other models, this is really difficult work. But Brother Mark is a superstar. I just want to say it. And alhamdulillah, just may Allah continue to bless the work that Dream of Detroit is doing, focused on families that need housing. It's a serious problem in the city of Detroit. You know, our downtown is all flashy and nice now, but this is a city of people who need housing and need resources and need to come out of poverty. That is what Detroit still looks like. So thank you, Sister Fitrah. Thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, and thank you.
Sister Pamela.
I just need to say though that what you just said, sister, can be repeated all across America. I mean, I need us to understand that, or not understand, but I just want to say, you know, we got homelessness, numbers of people sleeping on the street in DC, sleeping on the street in San Francisco, sleeping on this, I mean, just all over because of what the sister just described. So I want to just say it is not just in Detroit, it is everywhere across America that, you know, people are being look, wasn't that the story of New Orleans after that horrific flooding, or I can't even remember, but didn't they come back in and take that land over and build homes that were just so expensive that the people that lived there no longer could come back? So we can't forget, or you know, that these stories are repeated of the of all the oppressed people who don't have enough money, which is why Islam is so important, which is why we are growing by leaps and bounds, especially in the African American community, because Islam requires us to take care of the need of the oppressed. It requires that of us. We can't get away with that. Whereas others may be able to make excuses. Marsha, are there any other questions?
Yes, Sister Jackie has her hand raised. You can take yourself.
Please, let's keep Jackie. All of this to a question because we're out of time.
Yes. I am listening, and I really appreciate the words that the sister that mentioned, what she mentioned, but I just felt something every time you say the word very hard, very difficult, and it's not easy. Let's start using the language of it can be done, or yes, let's do this. Yes, encouraging words. I'm not down in it. I want us to be very concerned about how we present our appreciation when we give it to someone and when we're trying to encourage people to do these projects of this nature. Words can sometimes give you that depression feeling, like can't. I just don't like that word. Or it's very hard. It's too difficult. Although it may be. Well, let's try and say, yes, we can.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sister Jacqueline, you're correct. But let me just say, we need to use both words because we just finished with the Clara, and I tell you, I thought I was gonna be completely gray before it was all over, and I wasn't even in the thick of things. I was just kind of, the liaison. So the reality is that this is extremely hard work. But yes, we can accomplish it. And we see that by models in Detroit. We see that by New Medina that put 37 years into living somewhere where there was no lights, no sewer, no, in the deep south. Yes, the Clara is built. But Sister Jacqueline, I totally agree with you that words make people. But the reality is in the difficulty, after difficulty, comes the ease. In the difficulty is the answer. And yes, it is extremely hard. You got to be ready. I remember the sister, the group in Philadelphia said they was up committed to 6 a.m. meetings every week. And it's a lot of sacrifice. But yes, Sister Jacqueline, it can be accomplished. Do we have any more? This is no easy task. What they're doing in Detroit, what they're doing across the country in this is no easy task, and you need to be up to the long-term commitment that it's going to require, the sacrifice, the working for free before you can get to the monies. Like the sister said, the relationships, the building of relationships within our government. But yes, Sister Jacqueline, it can be accomplished, and by Allah's mercy, we see that in what is going on in Detroit. Mark, did you want to make a comment? And then we're going to close out.
Yeah, I'll just say again, thank you to everyone for joining today and for your feedback and your support and your du'as. I totally agree with Sister Fitrah. We have to hold both. This has been hard. It's been a learning curve. It's complex. But we're making our way through it. We're committed to it. We're learning it as we go along, and we're trying to share those learnings as much as we can. I want to say thank you, Sister Fitrah, for creating these networks and raising up these models for us all to learn from each other. One of the things that I've learned over the last couple of years is that there's a National Christian Community Development Association that is constantly sharing models, sharing funder resources, sharing playbooks, really. And we have like some loose networks among ourselves in the Muslim community, but we really need something that's structured that helps us formalize this and take it further in more cities where we have a presence, inshallah. So yeah, just thank you to everyone for welcoming us back here again.
I think if we can walk away with any lesson from today, is that it is the continuity and the consistency and the faith. Because again, I think about your incarceration program, and that concept began for us in the Nation of Islam with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, appealing to those who were in prison, the downtrodden, the lost and found. These are concepts, seeds that were planted 75, 80, 90 years ago that are finally blooming and budding. So I think, if anything, let's walk away with Let us continue to plant the seeds of progress. Let us continue to work together. Let us continue to have continuity in the transfer of our leadership. And let us not leave off our stories of our humble beginnings, of where we started and where we are today, because in that is we see the mercy of Allah upon our community and the guidance that we have had in this community, and how wonderful it has been that we used to talk about give us land, all we want is land in Muhammad Speaks, and now today to see a Dream of Detroit actually having land and housing the Muslims in such dignified ways. And we just continue to make dua for our community and the intervention that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, has bestowed upon us as a people, a downtrodden people, forgotten and left to be, oppressed. If it weren't for people like you, Mark, who has come along, a fruit from our tree. And we're grateful for you. With that said, Masha, I have 2 announcements. That is, next week we will see the Clara, and whew, a lot of hard work, but it was accomplished. We did have a ribbon cutting, so we will hear from the developer, and also Imam Talib, who will talk about how this has established us more in the city of Washington, D.C., and opened up greater opportunities and provided a level of dignity as contributors in the city towards affordable housing. And also next week, we will have our meet and greet on those who are traveling to Ghana. We'll come together at the end of the presentation on the Clara, and we will have a meeting about our trip to Ghana. With that said, Mark, let us know when you're ready to present that investment piece. Because don't doubt that we got some pioneers on here that's got lots of money just
I know it.
sitting in their
Inshallah.
mattress. I know that for a fact. And so don't doubt our community. We have shown that we are a community of miracles. Mark, thank you for being here. You're always welcome on Study Al-Islam. Imam Omar, if you could close us out.
ربنا اتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. Oh Allah, give us the good of this world and the good of the next world, and save us from the fire of sins. Ameen.
Ameen. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.